68 pounds. That's what Liesl Hoffman weighed when she arrived at Camp Rustin, Louisiana on May the 15th, 1945. Not 70, not 72. Exactly 68 pounds of bone and breath and skin stretched thin over a frame that had forgotten what abundance felt like. 3 months later she would cry over strawberry ice cream, not from hunger, not from gratitude, from shame so deep it felt like drowning. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. April 18th, 1945, Hamburg, Germany. The Wehrmacht telephone exchange on Rothenbaumchaussee had been burning for 3 hours when the American soldiers found Liesl in the basement. She was 19 years old, blonde hair matted with plaster dust hands, still gripping the headset she'd been wearing when the building came down. The soldiers spoke to her in broken German, asked her name, asked her unit, asked if she was armed. She answered each question in a voice that sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone older, someone more tired. No, she wasn't armed. She'd never held a gun in her life. She was a telephone operator. Had been since she was 16, since the Wehrmacht conscripted girls with steady hands and clear voices to connect calls between units, to route messages to say, "Connecting you now," in a tone that gave no hint of the cities burning, the fronts collapsing, the Reich dying one phone call at a time. They put her on a truck with 37 other women. Radio operators, clerical staff, telephone girls like her. None of them had fired a shot. All of them were prisoners of war. The American soldier who logged her into the manifest wrote her weight on the form with a pencil that paused for just a moment, as if the number couldn't be right, as if 68 pounds was a clerical error and not the measured truth of what total war does to a body over 3 years of ration cards, promising food and delivering sawdust. Liesl didn't remember much of the journey. Days blurred into each other like watercolors bleeding on wet paper. A camp in France where they slept on concrete floors and ate thin soup once a day. Women died there, not from violence, just from being too empty for too long, their bodies finally admitting what their minds had refused to accept. There was nothing left to burn for fuel. 23 women died on the journey from Hamburg to Louisiana. Liesl remembered their faces better than she remembered her own. May 2nd. They were loaded onto a transport ship in Le Havre. The ship was American massive clean in a way that seemed almost obscene. The hold where they kept the POWs had electric lights, running water, toilets that flushed. Liesl stood under an electric bulb for 5 minutes just staring at it. Steady light. No flicker, no rationing. Just light because light was possible, because electricity existed in quantities that didn't need to be measured in precious minutes per day. An American sailor walked past, saw her staring, said something in English she didn't understand. He smiled, not cruel, just confused by the German girl transfixed by a light bulb. She wanted to explain, "I haven't seen electric light that didn't flicker in 2 years. I forgot light could be steady." But her English consisted of maybe 40 words, and none of them were adequate for the feeling of standing under proof that somewhere in the world, power wasn't something you rationed, it was something you just had. 10 days crossing the Atlantic. The ship fed them twice a day. White bread. Actual white bread, not the grey stuff cut with sawdust that had been called bread in Hamburg since 1943. Soup with actual vegetables floating in it, recognizable carrots and potatoes, instead of mystery nutrition scraped from whatever the Reichsministry could process into technically edible paste. Liesl gained 3 pounds on that ship. Her body didn't know what to do with food that had nutritional value. She spent most of the crossing in the head, her digestive system attempting to remember how to process protein and fat and carbohydrates instead of cellulose and hope. May 15th, 1945. New Orleans. The ship docked at dawn. They were transferred to buses, canvas-covered trucks that rolled through a city that wasn't bombed. Liesl pressed her face to the gap in the canvas and stared. Buildings. Intact buildings. Glass in the windows. Paint on the walls. Cars moving through streets that had pavement instead of rubble paths carved through destruction. People on sidewalks carrying shopping bags, wearing clothes that fit, walking like they had places to be and weren't just scavenging through ruins, looking for anything that might burn for warmth or trade for food. The woman sitting next to Liesl, Ingrid Vogt, 35, former truck driver from Bavaria, whispered, "They didn't bomb it." Liesl turned. "What? New Orleans?" They didn't bomb it. Look, Ingrid gestured at the window. It's whole. The whole city is whole. It shouldn't have been surprising. The Americans had won. Of course, their cities weren't bombed. But seeing it, actually seeing buildings that weren't skeletons, seeing a city that functioned instead of merely survived, made something twist in Liesel's chest that felt dangerously close to understanding. The bus drove north, out of the city through countryside so green it hurt to look at. Fields, actual fields with crops growing not torn up for defensive positions or pocked with shell craters. Trees that had leaves, sky that wasn't hazed with smoke. 6 hours later, they arrived at Camp Rustin. The camp sat in northern Louisiana, surrounded by pine forest and humidity so thick you could chew it. May in Louisiana was already hot. Not Hamburg summer hot. A different kind of hot, wet and heavy, the kind that made your clothes stick to your skin within minutes of stepping outside. The camp itself was orderly. Neat rows of wooden barracks painted brown. Gravel paths between buildings. Chain-link fence around the perimeter guard towers at the corners, but nothing that looked cruel. It looked like what it was, a facility designed to hold prisoners according to Geneva Convention protocols, built by a country that had the resources to build proper prisoner-of-war camps instead of just repurposing whatever structures hadn't been bombed yet. They were processed, photographed, given numbers. Liesel became POW 7834. The American clerk who took her information spoke enough German to get through the paperwork. Name, age, rank, unit. When he got to medical screening, he looked at the scale, then at Liesel, then back at the scale. Wrote down 68 pounds. Didn't say anything, just wrote it and moved to the next line. They were assigned to barracks. Liesel got barracks 7 bunk 14, lower bunk. The mattress was thin but clean. There was a pillow. An actual pillow, not a sack stuffed with straw or newspaper, but a real pillow with real stuffing that gave when you pressed it. Liesel sat on the edge of the bunk and cried for 5 minutes. Not from sadness, from the sheer absurdity of crying over a pillow. That night, lying in the bunk, listening to 49 other women breathe in the darkness, Liesel thought about her mother. Clara Hoffmann, 48 years old, living in a Hamburg apartment with a partially collapsed roof and no electricity. What was she doing right now? It was 2 a.m. in Louisiana, 9 a.m. in Hamburg. Was she in line for ration cards? Was she eating the breakfast that passed for breakfast? Boiled grain maybe, or potato peels, if they had them. Liesel had a pillow. Her mother probably didn't. The thought sat in her chest like a stone. May 20th, 1945. 5th morning at Camp Rustin. The mess hall opened at 6 a.m. Liesel had been awake since 4, unable to sleep past dawn, her body still calibrated to years of waking early, to stretch rations to get to work before the bombs started falling to maximize the daylight hours, because electricity was rationed and you couldn't waste it on staying up past dark. She shuffled into the mess hall with the others. The line moved slowly. Women who'd forgotten what it meant to have enough food standing in front of metal trays, wondering if this was real or some elaborate trick that would end with the food snatched away at the last second. Liesel reached the serving station. An American soldier, young maybe 20, bored expression of someone doing routine work, scooped food onto her tray without looking at her. Scrambled eggs, 6 strips of bacon, toast, actual butter, a cup of coffee that smelled like real coffee, not the acorn-roasted substitutes they'd been drinking in Germany since 1942. Liesel carried her tray to a table, sat down, stared at the food. The eggs were yellow. Bright, almost aggressive yellow, the colour of eggs from chickens that ate real feed instead of whatever desperate farmers could scrape together. They steamed slightly in the cool morning air, giving off a smell that made Liesel's stomach clench with something between hunger and fear. But the bacon. The bacon sat at the edge of the tray, 6 strips arranged in 2 neat rows of 3. The fat had rendered clear as amber in the cooking, pooling slightly at the edges. Salt crystals caught the fluorescent light like tiny diamonds scattered across the meat. The edges were crispy, dark brown, almost black in places where the heat had worked its magic on protein and fat. Liesel picked up one strip with her fingers. It was still warm. The crispy edge crumbled slightly under her touch, releasing a smell that was smoke and salt, and something deeper, something animal and rich, that spoke to parts of her brain that predated language. She bit into it. The crispy edge shattered between her teeth. Then the fat hit her tongue, melting instantly, coating the inside of her mouth like warm silk. Salt came first, sharp and bright, making her salivary glands contract so hard it almost hurt. Then the fat, rich and heavy, carrying flavors she'd forgotten existed, smoke caramelization, the subtle sweetness of pork that had been properly fed and properly cooked. She chewed slowly. The bacon coated her throat on the way down, left a residue of smoke and salt that lingered, making her want to take another bite immediately, making her want to never stop tasting this. She finished the first strip, picked up the second, the third, each one disappearing into her mouth faster than the last, her body remembering what it meant to eat food that had substance, that had value, that wasn't just cellulose pretending to be nutrition. By the fourth strip, a memory surfaced unbidden. Hamburg winter, 1944. The kitchen in their apartment before the roof collapsed. Her mother standing over a pot boiling bones for the fourth time, trying to extract any remaining nutrition from marrow that had already given up everything it had. The smell had been thin, watery, the ghost of meat-haunting liquid that was mostly water and desperate hope. Her little brother Ernst, 12 years old, sitting at the table asking, "Is there meat today?" And her mother lying with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "Tomorrow, Liebchen, tomorrow there will be meat." There was never meat tomorrow. Liesel looked at the bacon still on her tray. Fifth strip, sixth strip. She was holding more protein, more fat, more actual nutritional value than Ernst had probably eaten in a month. She started crying, not soft tears, hard, shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep in her chest, somewhere she hadn't known could still break. She tried to stop, tried to breathe, but her body wouldn't cooperate. She pressed both hands to her mouth, trying to muffle the sound, but it came out anyway, raw and ugly and completely beyond her control. The woman across from her, Ingrid, the truck driver, looked up from her own plate alarm, crossing her face. "Liesel, are you?" But Liesel couldn't answer, could only sit there shaking while her mind played the loop on repeat. Mama eating tree bark. Ernst asking for meat. I'm eating 6 strips of bacon. Same war, same morning, same sky over both of us. She forced herself to breathe, forced her hands away from her face, picked up the 5th strip of bacon, put it in her mouth, chewed, swallowed. The fat coated her throat. The salt made her eyes water. She ate all 6 strips, ate the eggs, ate the toast, drank the coffee, ate everything on the tray while crying so hard she could barely see what she was putting in her mouth. By the time she finished 30, other women were crying too. The days developed a rhythm. Wake at dawn, mess hall at 6. Work detail at 8, laundry, mostly washing American uniforms in massive machines that used hot water and actual soap. Lunch at noon, free time in the afternoon, dinner at 5, lights out at 10. It was the free time that felt strangest. Hours with nothing to do, no air raid sirens to listen for, no rubble to clear, no ration cards to queue for, just time empty and available, stretching out like a luxury Liesel had forgotten how to use. On her 3rd day of free time, June 1st, a woman approached her in the yard. Older than Liesel, mid-20s maybe, with dark hair cut short and eyes that looked like they'd seen things but hadn't stopped thinking about them. "You're Liesel, yes. The telephone operator from Hamburg." Liesel nodded. "Yes. I'm Greta Eisenberg, radio operator, Cologne." She held out a hand, American style. Liesel shook it. "The camp commander asked me to help with translation for some of the younger girls. Your English is 40 words, Liesel said. "Maybe." Liesel. Greta smiled. It was a tired smile, but real. "Let's fix that. Come with me." They sat under a pine tree at the edge of the yard, and Greta began teaching Liesel English. Not formal lessons, just conversation, pointing at things and giving their names, practicing simple phrases. My name is, where is, thank you. After an hour, Greta pulled out a pack of American cigarettes, Chesterfields, offered one to Liesl. I don't smoke, Liesl said. Neither did I, before. Greta lit one, took a drag, exhaled slowly. The Americans give them to us. Free. Can you imagine free cigarettes? Like they have so many they can just give them away to prisoners. Liesl took one. Greta lit it for her. The smoke was harsh and sweet and made her head spin slightly, but there was something comforting about it, something that made the moment feel almost normal, like two women sitting under a tree having a cigarette instead of two prisoners of war trying to figure out how to exist in a world where the enemy gave you things for free. How long were you in Cologne? Liesl asked. Until April 25th. Our station got hit, Allied bombing. I was pulling 12-hour shifts trying to keep communications open between units that didn't exist anymore, routing messages for an army that was already dead but didn't know it yet. Greta tapped Ash onto the ground. They found me still at my post, still wearing the headset, still saying connecting you now to dead air. Did you? Liesl hesitated. Did you have family? Greta's face changed, closed slightly. A brother, Klaus, younger than me by 4 years. He was 20 when he died, January 1944, Leningrad siege. I'm sorry, don't be. Greta's voice was flat. He believed, really believed in the Führer, in the Reich, in the 1,000-year empire. Volunteered at 17, wrote me letters about glory and destiny and how we were building the future. She took another drag. He died in a frozen trench from dysentery. No glory, no destiny, just shit and cold and dying alone at 20 because he believed what they told him, what we all believed. They sat in silence for a moment. Do you believe? Liesl asked quietly. Greta looked at her. I believe I'm sitting under a tree in Louisiana, smoking a free American cigarette while my brother rots in an unmarked grave in Russia. I believe the Americans feed me 3 times a day, while my mother in Stuttgart eats bread cut with sawdust. I believe everything we were told was a lie, and I believed it anyway because everyone around me believed it too, and it's easier to believe a lie when everyone else is believing it with you. She stubbed out the cigarette. What do you believe? Liesl thought about bacon. About fat, rendering clear as amber. About Ernst asking if there was meat today. I believe I don't know how to live with what I'm learning. Greta nodded slowly. Then you're smarter than most of us. Come on, let's practice more English. You'll need it. By late June, Liesl had gained 14 pounds. 68 had become 82. Her hair had stopped falling out. Her gums had stopped bleeding. Her body was remembering how to be a body instead of just a framework for keeping vital organs barely functioning. The weight showed in her face first, the hollows under her cheekbones filling in slightly, the tendons in her neck less prominent. Her hands, God, her hands had looked like bird claws in April, all bone and tendon with skin stretched tight, had begun to look human again. She caught sight of herself in the latrine mirror one morning and didn't recognize the reflection for a solid 5 seconds. That girl in the mirror looked fed, looked like someone who had enough, looked like someone who wasn't starving. Liesl touched her face. The girl in the mirror touched back. Same motion, same person, but different. Becoming different with every meal, every day, every moment that passed in this place where food was reliable and lights stayed on and the enemy followed rules so meticulously it felt like an insult. July 28th, 1945. 2:17 in the afternoon. Liesl was hanging laundry on the line in the yard. American uniforms, heavy cotton still damp from the industrial washers. The Louisiana sun was brutal 101 degrees, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer and turned breathing into work. She heard it before she saw it. A sound that didn't belong. Musical. Mechanical. Bells chiming metal on metal ice against steel, making a tinkling rhythm that carried across the yard despite the heat. She looked up. A white cart was rolling across the compound. White enamel gleaming in the sun, pushed by an American soldier who was whistling something cheerful and tuneless. The cart had wheels that squeaked slightly with each rotation, and from the top of the cart, vapor was rising. Not steam, too cold for steam. This was condensation cold air meeting hot, creating fog that rolled down the sides of the cart like something from a dream. Liesel's hands tightened on the wet uniform she'd been holding. Water dripped onto her boots. She didn't notice. 37 women stopped what they were doing. Laundry, conversations, reading, walking. Everything stopped. Every head turned toward the cart that shouldn't exist, that couldn't exist, that was somehow rolling across the yard anyway with its impossible cargo of cold in the middle of a Louisiana summer. The soldier, young blonde, maybe 22, with the easy posture of someone who'd never known real hunger, pushed the cart to the center of the yard and stopped. He looked around at the frozen women and called out in heavily accented, badly pronounced German, "Dessert? Who wants dessert?" Nobody moved. The soldier tried again. "Sweet. You want sweet?" Still nothing. 37 women stood like statues staring at the white cart with its vapor trails and its promise of something that couldn't be real. The soldier shrugged, opened the cart's lid. More vapor poured out, billowed over the edges, rolled down the sides, pooled briefly on the ground, before dissipating in the heat. The soldier reached inside with a metal scoop big as a fist and lifted. When the scoop emerged, Liesel's breath caught. Color. Pink. Impossible, bright, almost violent pink against the silver of the scoop, and white swirled together with the pink, creating ribbons of color that looked like they'd been painted by someone who'd never seen real food, only imagined what food could look like if the world was kind and abundance was real, and summer meant frozen sweetness instead of rationed salt. The pink was already melting, already beginning to run down the sides of the scoop in slow rivulets, dripping back into the cart, each drop catching sunlight and throwing it back, amplified. "Strawberry ice cream," the soldier announced in English. Then, haltingly, "Erdbeer, Ace, cream, ice cream." Liesel hadn't heard those words together in 4 years, hadn't thought them, hadn't let herself remember that ice cream was a thing that existed, because remembering things that existed before the war meant remembering everything else that had been lost, and the list was too long, too heavy, too impossible to carry, while also trying to survive. "Who's first?" the soldier asked. A young woman stepped forward. Someone Liesel recognized, one of the newer arrivals, barely 20, from Hamburg like her. The girl approached the cart like someone approaching something that might bite. The soldier handed her a bowl, small metal already cold from being stored in the cart. The pink-white ice cream sat mounded in the bowl, a perfect scoop, already beginning to pool at the bottom where it touched the relatively warmer metal. The girl stared at it, lifted a spoon to her lips with a hand that shook visibly, opened her mouth, put the spoon inside. Her eyes went wide. Then she made a sound. Not quite a gasp, not quite a sob. Something between the two, something primal and broken and utterly involuntary. The spoon clattered against the bowl, her free hand flew to her mouth, and then she started crying. Hard, fast tears that came with no warning streaming down her face while her shoulders shook and the ice cream melted forgotten in her hand. "Cold," she whispered. "It's so cold." Liesel felt something twist in her chest, sharp and painful and familiar. She stepped forward. Her legs felt disconnected from her body, moving on their own, carrying her toward the cart and its impossible contents, while her mind screamed that this was wrong, this was a trick, this couldn't be real. The soldier looked at her. "You want—" Liesel nodded. Couldn't speak, just nodded. He handed her a bowl. The metal was cold against her palm, shockingly cold. Cold in a way that shouldn't be possible, not here, not in this heat. The ice cream sat in the bowl, pink and white, swirled together, soft-looking, almost cloud-like, beginning to melt at the edges where it touched air. Liesel lifted the spoon. The ice cream came away smooth, leaving a perfect round divot in the mound. She raised it to her mouth. The cold hit first, so cold it hurt her teeth, made her jaw ache. Cold that went beyond sensation into something almost painful, her nerves short-circuiting, trying to process temperature they'd forgotten existed. Then the sweetness, overwhelming, almost violent in its intensity. Real sugar, not saccharin, not the chemical sweeteners that had tasted like petroleum and sadness. Real sugar that exploded on her tongue like something alive, like something that wanted to be tasted, that demanded attention, that wouldn't let you ignore it even if you tried. The strawberry taste came next. Bright, artificial somehow, but also deeply, perfectly strawberry. A flavor she'd forgotten existed. A flavor that belonged to birthday parties before the war, to summer afternoons when summer meant freedom, instead of rationing, to a world where fruit was something you ate instead of something you remembered eating once a long time ago when things were different. She closed her eyes. The ice cream melted immediately in her mouth. Cold became liquid, became sweet, became memory. Her mother's kitchen summer, 1939, fresh strawberries in a bowl, cream so thick it left moustaches on Ernst's face when he drank it. Ernst laughing, Ernst asking for more, Ernst alive and 7 years old and not yet hungry, not yet aware that hunger was coming, that everything was about to change, that this moment of strawberries and cream was going to have to last him the rest of his short life. Liesl opened her eyes. The ice cream in her bowl was melting fast in the heat. Pink and white bleeding together, becoming soup, becoming liquid sugar and memory. She took another bite, and another, eating faster now, trying to taste it before it disappeared, before the heat took it, before this impossible moment ended, and she had to go back to being a prisoner in a camp, eating food that was adequate, but not kind, nutritious, but not generous enough, but not abundance. Around her, more women were approaching the cart, some crying, some laughing, some silent, their faces blank with shock. The soldier served them methodically, scooping ice cream into bowl after bowl, his expression caught between pleased that they liked it and disturbed by the intensity of their reactions. Liesl finished her bowl, scraped the last drops of melted pink liquid from the bottom, licked the spoon clean. She was crying. When had she started crying? She didn't remember starting, but her face was wet, and her throat was tight, and her hands were shaking. The soldier looked at her. "Ma'am, did I do something wrong?" Liesl stared at him. At his young face, his confusion, his genuine concern that maybe he'd hurt her somehow by giving her ice cream on a hot afternoon. Greta appeared beside her. Greta's face was carefully neutral, but her hands were clenched at her sides. Greta spoke to the soldier in English, her accent thick but comprehensible. "No, you did something kind. That's the problem." The soldier blinked. "Mom, I know," Greta said. "That's the problem too." That night, Liesl couldn't sleep. 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m. She lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, feeling the phantom cold of ice cream on her tongue, tasting strawberry that wasn't there anymore, her body remembering what her mind wished it could forget. At 2 a.m. she gave up, got out of bed quietly, trying not to wake the other women, and went to the latrine. The latrine was empty, fluorescent lights humming softly, mirrors reflecting her face back at her eyes, red skin splotchy, looking exactly like someone who'd been crying for hours. She turned on the faucet, splashed cold water on her face, once, twice, 3 times, trying to wash away the taste that wouldn't leave, the sweetness that had burrowed into her mouth and wouldn't let go. The door opened. Greta walked in, looking equally sleepless. They stared at each other for a moment. "Can't sleep either?" Greta asked. Liesl shook her head. "I keep tasting it. The ice cream. It won't go away." "I know." "Why?" Liesl's voice broke. "Why did it make me cry like that? It was just frozen milk and sugar. Just dessert. Why does it feel like—" She couldn't finish. Couldn't articulate what it felt like. Greta leaned against the sink. Because it was proof. Proof of what? Proof that everything we were told was a lie. Greta's voice was flat factual, like she was stating the weather. They told us America was weak, decadent, collapsing under the weight of its own softness, that we were strong because we could sacrifice, that hardship made us superior, that our willingness to eat sawdust bread and drink acorn coffee meant we were better, tougher, more deserving of victory. She paused, looked at Liesl directly. And then the enemy gave us strawberry ice cream on a Tuesday, just because it was hot. Not as a reward, not conditionally. Just because ice cream exists and it was available, and why wouldn't you give people dessert on a hot day? That kind of casual abundance. That's not weakness. That's strength so vast it doesn't even recognize itself as strength. That's a system so wealthy it can afford to give luxury items to prisoners of war and not even think it's remarkable. Liesl felt something cold settle in her stomach. We lost. We lost years ago. We just didn't know it yet. We lost the moment we chose a system that promised glory, but delivered hunger. They didn't beat us with better soldiers or better tactics. They beat us with ice cream on Tuesdays. Liesl turned back to the sink, gripped the porcelain edges hard enough that her knuckles went white. I want to go home, but I'm afraid home doesn't have ice cream anymore. Maybe it never will again. It won't, Greta said quietly. Not for a long time. Maybe not in our lifetimes. And you'll go home and you'll try to explain what you learned here and nobody will understand. They'll think you're talking about dessert. They won't understand you're talking about the moment you realized everything you believed was backwards. How do we live with this? We carry two truths now, Greta said. The truth we live here and the truth we can tell our families. Neither one is whole. Neither one is enough. But we carry them both anyway because that's what survivors do. We survive, and we remember. And someday, maybe we teach others so they don't have to learn the way we learned. Liesl let go of the sink, turned to face Greta. I have two nieces in Hamburg. Otto is 7. Frida is 5. Last letter I got before capture said Otto weighed 38 pounds. He should weigh 50 at least. My sister Matilda was feeding them potato peels and calling it dinner. Her voice was shaking now. This morning I ate 6 strips of bacon. 6. Real bacon with real fat and real salt. And this afternoon I ate strawberry ice cream and cried because it was too sweet. While Otto ate potato peels, while Frida went to bed hungry, while my mother gnawed on tree bark and called it sustenance. How can I call myself an aunt when I eat ice cream while children starve? Greta grabbed Liesl's shoulders, held her firmly. The kind who's alive. Your death won't feed Otto. Your starvation won't save Frida. Your guilt won't put food in their mouths. All you can do is survive. Survive and remember. Remember that this... She gestured at the latrine, the camp beyond it, the whole impossible situation. This happened. That the enemy fed you better than your own side. That kindness came from the people you were supposed to hate. That ice cream broke you more thoroughly than any interrogation could have. Remember it, because forgetting would be worse. Liesl pulled away, walked to the wall, pressed her forehead against the cool tile. I ate 3 bowls, she whispered. He kept asking if anyone wanted more, and nobody was taking seconds because we were all crying or stunned or both. So I went back. Twice. 3 bowls total, pink and white melting in the heat. I ate it all, while Otto weighed 38 pounds. Silence for a long moment. Then Greta's voice quiet and firm. Listen to me, Liesl. That guilt you're feeling, that shame, that's good. That means you're not broken. That means you can still feel. Don't let it destroy you. Let it teach you. Let it show you what we were part of, what we believed, what we enabled by not questioning, and then use it. Use it to make sure this doesn't happen again. That's all we can do now. Survive and remember and teach. Liesl turned around. Will that be enough? I don't know, Greta said honestly, but it's all we have. They stood there in the fluorescent hum of the latrine, 2 women who'd learned the truth over strawberry ice cream, 2 women who'd have to carry that truth home to a country that wasn't ready to hear it, 2 women who'd tasted defeat and found it sweet and would never quite forgive themselves for that sweetness. Outside, Louisiana's summer continued, hot and thick and abundant. Inside, 2 prisoners of war began learning how to live with what they knew. The taste of strawberries lingered for days. Part 2. Chocolate and Ashes. July 31st, 1945. 3 days after the strawberry. The white cart appeared again at 2:15 p.m., rolling across the compound with its musical chiming, its impossible cold vapor rising in the heat. This time nobody froze. Nobody stared in disbelief. The women moved toward it with something between eagerness and dread, like approaching a wound they couldn't stop touching. Corporal Wyatt Caldwell. Liesl had learned his name, now had heard the other guards call it out, opened the cart with the same easy motion as before. But today the contents were different. 3 tubs, chocolate dark and rich like earth, vanilla pure white, and something he called butter pecan in his Texas drawl, pale yellow, with dark fragments suspended throughout. "New flavors," he announced in his broken German. "You choose what you want." Liesl stepped forward. Not first this time, 4th or 5th. Some hesitation was gone now, replaced by something more complicated. Knowledge that this would hurt, choosing to hurt anyway. She pointed at the chocolate. Wyatt scooped. The ice cream came away in a perfect sphere, dark brown, almost black in the shadows, catching light at the edges where the scoop had compressed it. He placed it in a bowl, handed it to her with a smile that was just doing his job. Just serving dessert, just an American kid who didn't understand he was handing out proof disguised as dairy. Liesl took the bowl. The metal was already cold. She walked to the shade of Barracks 7, sat on the steps, lifted the spoon. The chocolate was different from the strawberry. Heavier, more serious. The color alone was stunning real chocolate, not the ersatz substitute that had tasted like wax and petroleum and had been called chocolate only because they needed to call it something. She put the spoon in her mouth. Bitterness arrived before the cold. Dark and complex, the taste of real cocoa hitting her tongue first, then the cold swept through, numbing and sharp. Then sweetness chased the bitter, the 2 flavors dancing across her taste buds in waves. The chocolate coated everything, her teeth, the roof of her mouth, her throat. Cold and sweet and bitter all at once. Complex in a way that made her want to close her eyes and focus only on taste, on the way the flavor built and shifted and lingered. The taste pulled memory. Birthday, 1939. She was 13. Her mother had made chocolate cake with real cocoa powder before the war, before cocoa became something you could only get on the black market for prices no one could afford. The cake had been dark and rich, and had left chocolate smears on the plates that Liesl and Ernst had fought over who got to lick clean. Ernst would never taste chocolate again. The thought arrived cold and factual. Ernst was 12 now, assuming he was still alive, assuming he hadn't died from malnutrition or bombing or one of the dozen ways children were dying in Hamburg this summer. If he was alive, he was eating whatever Mama could find. Potato peels, tree bark, bread cut with so much sawdust it left splinters in your gums. Liesl ate the chocolate ice cream slowly, each bite deliberate, each bite remembered. This is what abundance tastes like. This is what the enemy has. This is what we were fighting against while being told they were weak. Around her, other women made their choices. Ingrid Vogt took the butter pecan, made a face at the first bite. Why put nuts in ice cream, then kept eating anyway? A younger woman, whose name Liesl didn't know, took vanilla, sat alone, ate with her eyes closed like she was praying. Greta appeared holding chocolate like Liesl, sat down on the steps beside her without asking. They ate in silence for a moment. "Do you think it gets easier?" Liesl asked. "The guilt? No," Greta said. "I think we just get better at carrying it." A voice interrupted them. Sergeant Ruth Blackwell, the female guard from Kentucky, approaching with her own bowl of ice cream. She spoke in careful, slow English. "What flavor you have?" Greta translated for Liesl, then answered in English. "Chocolate." Ruth smiled. "Chocolate is good. My favorite is butter pecan. My daddy, he loved it. Said the crunch reminded him of something alive in his mouth." She paused, seeming to realize something. "Sorry, my German is not good." "Your German is better than my English," Greta said. "You speak English very good," Ruth replied. Liesl watched this exchange with a feeling like vertigo. Two women who should be enemies talking about ice cream preferences like neighbors, like friends, like the war wasn't happening, wasn't over, hadn't killed millions of people and destroyed half of Europe in the process. Ruth noticed Liesl staring. "You okay, honey?" Liesl didn't understand the English, but understood the tone. Concerned, kind, genuine. She nodded. Ruth smiled again, gave a little wave, walked away, eating her butter pecan. "That was the most surreal conversation I've ever had," Greta said quietly. "Discussing ice cream flavors with an enemy guard like we're at a cafe in peacetime." "Is she the enemy?" Liesl asked. "She's never been cruel. None of them have. They follow the rules. They give us food. They gave us ice cream. What kind of enemy does that?" "The kind that's won," Greta said, "so completely that they can afford to be kind." The week blurred into routine, punctuated by ice cream. The cart came every few days, never on a schedule you could predict, but often enough that the women stopped being shocked and started having preferences, started debating flavors, like it mattered, like this was normal, like prisoners of war arguing about whether vanilla was too plain or chocolate too rich was a thing that should happen in a world that made sense. Liesl found herself defending vanilla in these debates. "It's the purest," she argued to Ingrid one evening. "No hiding behind flavors, just cream and sugar and cold. You can taste the quality." "But chocolate has depth," another woman countered. "Layers, complexity." "Butter pecan has texture," Ingrid said. "The nuts add something, dimension." They were sitting in the shade of the mess hall having this debate with complete seriousness, and part of Liesl wanted to scream. Part of her wanted to stand up and shout, "Our families are starving, and we're ranking ice cream flavors like critics at a restaurant. What is wrong with us?" But another part of her, smaller but growing, whispered, "This is what normal feels like. This is what it's like to have enough, to have more than enough, to have so much that you can have opinions about excess." August 6th, 1945, 10:17 a.m. The announcement came over the camp's public address system. The voice was American speaking English, but the tone was clear enough that even the women who didn't understand the language stopped what they were doing. Greta's face went white. She was standing near Liesl in the yard holding a laundry basket. The basket fell from her hands. "What?" Liesl asked. "What did they say?" Greta's voice was hollow. "Atomic bomb. Dropped on Hiroshima. Estimated casualties." She stopped. Started again. "They said 80,000 dead. Instantly. One bomb." The number was too large to mean anything. 80,000. 80,000 people. Gone. In an instant. Liesl's mind couldn't hold it. Kept trying to picture 80,000 individuals and failing, the number dissolving into abstraction because human brains aren't built to comprehend death on that scale. "I had a pen pal in Hiroshima," Liesl heard herself say. "Exchange student program, 1940, before everything. Her name was Keiko. She taught me Japanese words. Konnichiwa, arigato. She sent me a postcard of Mount Fuji." She stopped. Started again. "She's dead now, isn't she? If she was still in Hiroshima, she's dead." Greta didn't answer. Didn't need to. Around them, other women were reacting as the news spread in German whispers. Shock. Horror. And underneath it, something worse, the dawning understanding that this was what losing looked like. This was the weapon that ended wars. This was proof that they had been fighting something they could never have defeated, that the propaganda about American weakness had been so backwards, it was almost funny, except nothing about this was funny. That afternoon at 2 p.m., the ice cream cart appeared. Nobody moved toward it at first. Wyatt stood there looking confused, holding his scoop, probably wondering why the women who usually mobbed the cart were standing motionless, staring at him like he'd brought something obscene instead of frozen dessert. "Ice cream," he tried. "Today is orange sherbet and vanilla." Silence. Finally, Liesl stepped forward. She didn't know why. Maybe because standing still felt worse. Maybe because 80,000 people were dead and she was still alive and had to do something with the being alive, even if that something was eating ice cream while the world ended. She pointed at Vanilla. Wyatt served her with visible relief, probably glad someone was acting normal. Liesl took the bowl, walked to the barracks steps, sat down. The vanilla was pale, almost white, simple and pure, like she'd argued it should be. She lifted the spoon. Sweetness dissolved instantly on her tongue, then cold ached through her jaw. She worked her mouth automatically, though there was nothing to chew, her body going through motions while her mind was somewhere over Hiroshima, trying to picture a flash of light that erased 80,000 people, failing, returning to the vanilla melting in her mouth. She was crying. When had she started crying? The tears fell into the bowl, making tiny ripples in the melting ice cream salt, mixing with sweet. One by one, other women approached the cart, took their bowls, sat apart from each other, scattered across the yard, eating in complete silence. Some crying, some blank-faced, some eating mechanically like taking medicine. Wyatt stood by the cart, looking increasingly disturbed. Finally, he approached Greta, who was eating vanilla, like Liesl, tears running down her face while she spooned melted ice cream into her mouth with methodical precision. "Ma'am," Wyatt's voice was uncertain. Should I not have brought it today?" Greta looked up at him. Her face was wet. Her eyes were red. She answered in English, 100,000 people died today. How do we eat ice cream?" Wyatt flinched. I don't know, ma'am, but you still gotta eat. My sergeant said, war don't stop just cause people die. You still gotta eat." "Your sergeant is right," Greta said. Her voice was flat. "And that's the most terrible thing I've ever heard." Wyatt opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the women scattered across the yard eating ice cream and crying, looked back at Greta. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I don't know what else to do except push the cart." "I know," Greta said. "That's not your fault. None of this is your fault. You're just a kid doing your job. But understand something." She gestured at the women at the yard, at the whole situation. "This ice cream you give us, it shows us what we lost to. Every time we taste sweetness, we understand more completely that we never had a chance. That our side starved us while telling us we were strong, while your side was so wealthy it gives dessert to prisoners. That's not just kindness, that's proof. And proof is harder to swallow than any bomb." Wyatt looked stricken, didn't respond, just walked back to his cart, closed the lid, pushed it away slowly, his shoulders hunched like someone carrying weight he hadn't known was there. October 12th, 1945. Mail call. The Red Cross had finally processed enough paperwork that letters from Germany were arriving. 5 months delayed. 5 months between writing and receiving. 5 months of wondering if the people you wrote to were still alive. Liesl's name was called. She approached the distribution table with her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. 1 letter. Thin envelope. Her sister's handwriting. She walked to her bunk, sat down, stared at the envelope for 5 minutes before opening it. The letter was dated June 15th, written almost 4 months ago. Matilda's handwriting was shakier than Liesl remembered. The paper was thin, cheap, probably the only kind available. "Dear Liesl, we received word through the Red Cross that you are alive and in American custody. Mama cried for an hour when we got the news. Good tears, she said. Good tears because you're alive. Otto and Frida ask about you every day. I tell them Tante Liesl is safe. They smile when I say this. They think safe is good. I don't tell them what safe might mean. I don't tell them you probably have food while they eat potato peels. I don't tell them there are places in the world where people aren't hungry. They wouldn't understand. They've been hungry their whole lives. Otto weighs 35 pounds now, down from 38 in March. He should weigh 55 at least. Frida is 28 pounds, should be 40. The doctor at the clinic, the one that's still open, says they have malnutrition. I wanted to laugh. Of course they have malnutrition. Everyone has malnutrition. But he meant severe. He meant organ damage. He meant maybe permanent. There's no medicine. The hospital was bombed. The supply lines are gone. We wait for ration cards that promise 900 calories and deliver 600. We eat potato peels and call it dinner. Mama boils bones until they're soft enough to chew. We eat them. Bones. Actual bones. Otto asked me yesterday, "When will Tante Liesel come home?" I said, "Soon." He said, "Will she bring food?" I didn't know how to answer that. Should I tell him where safe means? Should I explain that the Americans who we were told were weak and decadent are probably feeding you 3 meals a day? Should I tell my children that their aunt in prison eats better than they do in freedom? I don't know, Liesel. I don't know how to think about this. I'm glad you're alive. I'm so glad you're alive. But I lie awake at night wondering what alive means for you. Wondering if you have enough. Hoping you do. Hating myself for hoping. Please write when you can. Please tell me you're okay. Even if it's a lie. Especially if it's a lie. Your sister Matilda. Liesel read the letter 3 times, then sat holding it staring at nothing while her bunkmates moved around her preparing for dinner. 35 pounds. Otto weighed 35 pounds. She'd eaten 3 bowls of ice cream in July. 3 bowls. Pink and white and melting sweet enough to make her cry, cold enough to hurt her teeth, while Otto dropped from 38 pounds to 35. Greta appeared beside her bunk. "Mail." Liesel handed her the letter wordlessly. Greta read it. Her face didn't change expression. When she finished, she folded it carefully, handed it back. "Are you going to write back? What do I say? The truth or a lie? Those are your options." "What's the truth?" Greta sat down on the edge of the bunk. "The truth is you're being treated according to Geneva Convention. 3 meals a day, medical care, adequate housing. The truth is you've gained 14 pounds since arriving. The truth is the Americans give you ice cream on hot afternoons because they have so much food they can afford to give prisoners dessert." "I can't write that." "I know. So you write, 'Dear Matilda, I am well. I am being treated correctly. I have enough to eat. I hope you are managing. I think of you every day.' Every word true. Every word a lie." Liesel looked at the letter in her hands, at her sister's shaking handwriting, at the words, "Should I tell him where safe means? How do I live like this?" "1 day at a time," Greta said, "and you don't eat for 3 days." "What? You're going to stop eating?" Greta said flatly. "Probably starting tomorrow. Maybe you'll make it through breakfast, maybe not. But you'll stop. Because the guilt will get too heavy and you'll think maybe if you're hungry too it'll balance something. It won't. It'll just make you sick. And in 3 or 4 days I'm going to force feed you like a child, and you're going to hate me for it. And then you're going to start eating again, and we'll never talk about those 3 days. Liesel stared at her. "How do you know?" "Because that's what I did when I got my mother's letter, and a woman named Johanna force-fed me, and I hated her for 4 days. And then I understood she was right. The guilt doesn't go away, but you carry it alive or you carry it dead. Those are the options." That night, Liesel couldn't eat dinner. Stared at the tray of food, pork chops, green beans, bread with actual butter, and felt her throat close. She skipped breakfast the next morning, and lunch, and dinner. By October 15th, she'd lost 4 pounds, 82 down to 78. Her head felt light. Her hands shook. The camp doctor called her in, took her vitals, threatened forced feeding if she didn't start eating within 24 hours. October 16th, late afternoon. Liesel was lying on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, when Greta appeared with a bowl and a spoon. "Sit up," Greta said. "I'm not hungry." "I didn't ask if you were hungry. Sit up." Liesel sat up. Greta sat beside her, held out a spoonful of mashed potatoes. Plain, lukewarm, simple. "Open your mouth." "I can't." "Open your mouth." Something in Greta's voice left no room for argument. Liesel opened her mouth. Greta put the spoon in. Liesel swallowed automatically. "Again." Another spoonful. Another swallow. Greta fed her like a child, methodical and patient, and completely without sympathy. After the 4th spoonful, Liesel started crying. "I ate 3 bowls of ice cream while Otto weighs 35 pounds. What does that say about me?" "It says you're alive." "That's not good enough." "It's all you have." Greta's voice was hard. You were 16 when the war started. You didn't choose this. You were conscripted to connect phone calls. You never shot anyone. You never hurt anyone. You did your job and believed what everyone around you believed because that's what humans do. And now you're being punished by people who give you ice cream. Do you understand how insane that is? It doesn't change that Otto weighs 35 pounds. No, it doesn't. And you'll carry that the rest of your life. But you'll carry it alive. Now eat. Liesl ate. Spoonful after spoonful, crying the entire time, swallowing food that tasted like guilt and survival, and the impossible weight of being the one who got fed while everyone you loved went hungry. When the bowl was empty, Greta set it aside. October 20th. That's in 4 days. I received a letter from my mother. I'm going to read it to you. Not because I want to, because you need to understand you're not alone in this. She pulled out a letter.
Read aloud. Dear Greta, Stuttgart is 40% destroyed. Ration cards promise 900 calories but deliver 600. I eat bread that is 60% sawdust. It leaves splinters in my gums. I hope you are being treated well. I hope you have enough to eat. I worry about you constantly, my dear girl. I dream you are somewhere with food and safety. Please tell me this is true. Greta folded the letter. I can't tell her it's true. Not honestly. So I'll write, Dear Mama, I am well. The Americans follow Geneva Convention. I have enough to eat. I hope you are managing. Every word true, every word a lie. This is how we live now. November the 28th, 1945. The last ice cream before repatriation. The women had been notified shipping out in February. 3 more months in Camp Rustin, then trains and boats back to whatever was left of Germany. The cart appeared one final time, rolling across the yard with its familiar music, its impossible cold. Wyatt Caldwell pushed it with his usual easy rhythm, but something in his expression was different. Sad, maybe, or just aware that this routine was ending. Last call, he announced. Before you go home. Liesl took vanilla. Greta took chocolate. They sat together on the barracks steps, weak winter sun, doing nothing against the cold that was finally coming even to Louisiana. They ate in silence. The ice cream was the same as always, sweet, cold, perfect. But it tasted different now, like an ending, like proof that would have to be carried home and explained to people who wouldn't understand. Wyatt approached after most of the women had been served. He stood awkwardly for a moment, then spoke in his careful German. I hear you leave in February. That's correct, Greta said. Will you? He hesitated. Will you be okay when you go back? Long pause. Liesl and Greta looked at each other. Liesl answered in English. She'd been practicing for months. I don't know. I think I am more afraid of home than of this camp, because this camp had hope. Home has only ashes. Wyatt looked stricken. I'm sorry. Don't be, Liesl continued. You gave us ice cream. That is more than our country gave us. Ma'am, I just push a cart. Greta shook her head. No. You gave us something we couldn't fight. Bombs we understood. Cruelty we expected. But kindness. Kindness that proved everything we believed was backwards. That's what defeated us. Not your army. Your ice cream cart. Wyatt opened his mouth. Closed it. Looked at these 2 women who'd be gone in 3 months, who'd learned something from his ice cream cart that he'd never intended to teach. I hope, he started. Stopped. Started again. I hope it gets better. Over there. I hope you find something good. Thank you, Greta said quietly. So do we. The vanilla melted on Liesl's tongue. The chocolate coated Greta's mouth. They finished their bowls in silence, scraping up the last drops, licking spoons clean. Knowing this sweetness wouldn't follow them home. Knowing home was rubble and hunger, and people who would never understand what ice cream had taught them about truth and lies, and the terrible gift of enemy kindness. The cart rolled away for the last time, bells chiming, growing fainter, disappearing around the corner of a building. The music faded. The cold dissipated in winter air. They would leave in February. They would carry the taste of strawberries and chocolate home to a country that had forgotten what sweetness meant. They would try to explain. They would fail. But first, 3 more months of American abundance. 3 more months of learning that the cruelest weapon wasn't the bomb that killed 100,000. It was ice cream given to prisoners on a Tuesday afternoon, because bombs you could rebuild from. Kindness that proved you were lied to, that stayed with you forever. February 8th, 1946.
The trucks arrived at dawn. 200 women lined up in the yard with their belongings. Mostly nothing. A few letters, clothes issued by the camp photographs if they were lucky. Liesl stood holding a small canvas bag containing 3 letters from Matilda, 1 from her mother, and a pencil stub she'd been using to write responses she could never quite finish. The weight she carried wasn't in the bag. It was 11 pounds heavier than the 68 she'd arrived with. 79 pounds of proof that the enemy had fed her better than her own side ever had. Greta stood beside her in line, equally sparse in possessions, equally heavy in understanding. They hadn't talked much in the past weeks. What was there to say that hadn't already been said over melting ice cream and forced meals and letters from home that carved new wounds every time they arrived? The trucks rolled out at 7 a.m. Through the gates of Camp Rustin for the last time, past the pine forests of Louisiana, south toward New Orleans, and the ships that would carry them back across an ocean to a continent that had torn itself apart. Liesl pressed her face to the gap in the canvas cover, watching America pass. Intact buildings, paved roads, cars, people walking with purpose, carrying shopping bags, living lives that the war had touched, but not destroyed. She thought about Otto, 35 pounds in Hamburg, and felt something twist in her chest that might have been relief or guilt or both. Relief to be leaving this abundance that felt like accusation. Guilt that she was grateful to escape proof of what she'd lost to. The ship left Le Havre on February 12th. 3 weeks crossing the Atlantic in winter storms that turned the hold into a nightmare of seasickness and cold. Liesl spent most of it in her bunk. Not sick, just unwilling to move. Unwilling to eat the adequate but not generous food the ship provided, unwilling to do anything except lie there and think about strawberry ice cream melting in July heat while her nephew lost 3 pounds he couldn't afford to lose. March 5th, dawn. The train crossed into Germany. You could see it immediately. The change, the devastation. Fields that should have been preparing for spring planting were torn up for defensive positions that hadn't mattered. Forests reduced to stumps, villages that were just rubble with paths carved through. The train slowed approaching Cologne. Liesl looked out the window and couldn't breathe. The city was gone. Just gone. Maybe 10% of buildings still standing, and those were skeletal, burnt-out husks. The cathedral stood alone in a moonscape of destruction, its spires intact through some miracle of bombs falling everywhere, except there, a monument to faith in a city that had lost everything else. A woman across from Liesl started crying. Then another. Then half the car was crying, including women who weren't from Cologne, who had no connection to this city, except the understanding that their cities looked the same, that all of Germany looked like this, now that this was what losing meant in concrete terms. Your country erased your cities, reduced to geometry problems in rubble removal. Frankfurt was worse. Or maybe it just seemed worse because they'd already seen Cologne. Or maybe every city in Germany was equally destroyed and the distinctions didn't matter anymore. The train stopped in Frankfurt to split. Women travelling north to Hamburg, west to Stuttgart, south to Munich. Last chance to say goodbye to the women you'd survived with, learned with, cried over ice cream with. Greta and Liesl stood on the platform. Around them, other women were embracing, exchanging addresses written on scraps of paper, promising to write, promising to remember. Hamburg for you, Stuttgart for me, Greta said. 300 kilometers, different occupation zones. Might take weeks for letters to get through. We'll write anyway, Liesl said. Yes. Greta pulled out a piece of paper already written on. My address, my mother's apartment, assuming it's still standing. She handed it to Liesl. Promise you'll write. Promise you'll tell me if... She didn't finish. Didn't need to. I promise. Liesel wrote her own address, or what had been her address in April 1945, which might not exist anymore. Remember the ice cream? How could I forget? Greta's smile was painful. Remember that we learned the truth. What do we do with the truth? We teach it, when we can, however we can. We make sure the next generation doesn't have to learn it the way we did. They embraced.
Brief, fierce, the kind of hug that says everything because words aren't adequate. Then separate trains, separate directions, separate cities that were equally ruins, but ruins they had to face alone now. Liesel's train pulled out, heading north. She watched Greta's platform recede, watched the woman who'd force-fed her and taught her English and explained what ice cream meant, become a small figure, then a dot, then gone. March 7th, 1946, Hamburg Hauptbahnhof. The station was damaged but functional. Makeshift repairs, broken windows covered with boards, but trains still running, because trains had to run, because civilization meant keeping the systems working, even when the buildings that housed them were destroyed. Liesel stepped off the train into Hamburg, and the smell hit her immediately. Rubble dust, old fires, something organic and wrong that might have been bodies still buried under collapsed buildings, or might have been sewage from broken pipes, or might have been both. The walk from the station to her family's apartment took an hour. Should have taken 20 minutes, but the streets were obstacle courses. Rubble cleared to the sides, narrow paths through destruction buildings that looked intact from one angle, revealing themselves as hollow shells when you passed. She counted intact buildings. Got to 23 in an hour of walking. 23 buildings with roofs and walls and windows. Everything else was damage in varying degrees. Her street, Erikastrasse, was 60% destroyed. Her building was still standing. Mostly. The roof had partially collapsed. The top floor was gone. But the lower floors looked intact, or intact enough walls standing even if the walls didn't have much inside them anymore. Liesel climbed the stairs. The stairwell was dark. No electricity bulbs, gone, probably stolen for light in buildings that still had power. She counted steps by memory and touch until she reached the second floor, her family's apartment door 2B. She knocked, waited, heard movement inside, slow movement, shuffling. The sound of someone who didn't move quickly anymore because moving quickly required energy, and energy required food. The door opened. Her mother stood there. Clara Hoffman, 48 years old, looking 68. Gaunt, didn't cover it. Skeletal, didn't cover it. She'd lost maybe 40 pounds, maybe more. Her face, all bones and hollows, her hands thin enough to see every tendon and vein, her eyes huge in her shrunken face. Liesel. Her voice was a whisper. Liesel. Mama. Clara pulled her inside, or tried to, but didn't have the strength to pull, so Liesel stepped in and let her mother hold her, felt bones through the coat, felt her mother shaking with something between laughter and sobs. You're alive! You're alive! Mein Gott, you're alive! The apartment was freezing. No heat. The windows were intact, but frost formed on the inside of the glass. A single kerosene lamp provided light, because electricity was rationed 2 hours per day, if you were lucky, none if you weren't. Matilda appeared from the back room. Her sister, 26 years old, also skeletal, also aged beyond her years. Behind her, 2 children. Otto was 7, should have weighed 55 pounds minimum, looked like he weighed 30, arms like sticks, legs like sticks, face pinched and ancient, eyes too large for his skull. Frida was 5, should have weighed 40 pounds, looked like she weighed 25. Same stick limbs, same ancient child face, same eyes that had seen too much hunger too early. They stared at Liesel like she was a stranger, which she was. They'd been babies when she left. She was just a name to them now. Tante Liesel, who went away and was in prison and was maybe coming back, but also maybe not. Otto, Frida, Matilda said softly. This is your Tante Liesel. Can you say hello? They didn't say hello, just stared. Otto's stomach was distended slightly. malnutrition belly, kwashiorkor. The kind of starvation that damaged organs that might be permanent, that turned children into medical cases instead of just hungry kids. That evening dinner. Matilda had saved extra rations for Liesel's return. Potato soup, thin. 3 potatoes boiled in water with some salt. Bread that was maybe 30% actual wheat, the rest sawdust and filler that scraped your throat going down and left splinters in your gums. They ate by kerosene lamplight. Mama Matilda Otto, Frieda Liesel. 5 people sharing 4 bowls because they only had 4 bowls left. Everything else lost or broken or traded for food. Otto ate his soup carefully, scraping the bowl with his spoon to get every drop, his movements precise and practiced, a child who knew food was scarce and wasting a single drop was unforgivable. Frieda ate slower, her eyes getting heavy, falling asleep between spoonfuls. Matilda had to shake her awake. "Finish your soup, Liebchen. You need to eat. Need." Liesel ate mechanically. The soup tasted like water and deprivation. Nothing like the meals at Camp Rustin. Nothing like abundance. This was survival math turned into liquid minimum calories required to keep a body functioning. Nothing more, nothing extra, no kindness in the measurements. After dinner, Otto looked at Liesel with his 2 old eyes. "Tante Liesel." "Yes, Otto." "Mama said you were in prison, in America." "That's right. Did they hurt you?" The question landed like a stone. Liesel felt Matilda's eyes on her, felt her mother's attention sharpen, felt the weight of how she answered this mattering in ways she couldn't predict. "No," Liesel said carefully. "They didn't hurt me." "Did they give you bad food?" Liesel's throat closed. She tried to speak. Couldn't. Tried again. "No." Otto's face brightened slightly. "Good. Mama said prisoners get bad food, but you didn't. That's good." Matilda's expression was unreadable. Mama looked down at her empty bowl. Frieda, still half asleep, mumbled, "What did they give you?" "They gave me ice cream." Silence. Frieda's eyes opened fully. Otto tilted his head, confused. "What's ice cream?" Frieda asked. The question hit Liesel like a physical blow. The child didn't know the word, was too young to remember before the war, had been 3 years old when luxury became memory, had lived her entire conscious life in a world where frozen dessert was a concept that didn't exist. Liesel tried to explain. "It's frozen milk, with sugar and strawberries." Frieda's face scrunched up, trying to imagine this. "Frozen milk, like ice." "Yes, but sweet and soft and cold." "That sounds like a dream," Otto said quietly. Liesel felt tears starting. "It was, and that's the problem." Later, after the children were asleep, Matilda and Liesel stood in the kitchen while Mama boiled water for something that might charitably be called tea-dried leaves, not real tea, just leaves from whatever plants weren't poisonous. Matilda spoke without looking at Liesel. "Did you really eat ice cream while my children starved?" Liesel didn't lie. "Yes." "Why didn't you refuse?" "Because I was 68 pounds when I arrived, because refusing wouldn't have fed Otto, because—" She broke down. "Because I'm weak. I'm a coward. I survived by eating enemy food while you starved." Matilda turned to her then. Her face was hard. "I don't know if I can forgive that. I don't know if I can either." They didn't speak again that night. Liesel lay in her old bed, somehow still intact, somehow not burned for firewood yet, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. Outside, Hamburg was silent. No electricity for streetlights. No cars. Just cold and dark, and the sound of wind through broken buildings. She thought about vanilla ice cream melting in her mouth, about chocolate coating her tongue, about strawberries and sweetness and Wyatt Caldwell's confused face when women cried over dessert. She thought about Otto asking, "What's ice cream?" and not understanding the answer because his whole life was hunger and frozen sweetness was a fairy tale. She didn't sleep. March 20th, 1946. Liesel wrote her first letter to Greta. Dear Greta, I told Otto about the ice cream. He didn't understand. Frida doesn't even know the word. I destroyed my relationship with Matilda. She looks at me like I'm a traitor. Maybe I am. How do you live with this love, Liesel? April 3rd, 1946. Greta's response arrived. Dear Liesel, you're not a traitor. You're a survivor. There's a difference. I applied to teach at Gymnasium Stuttgart. Headmaster asked what I'd teach about the war. I said, the truth. That we lost when the enemy gave us ice cream, and it was the sweetest thing we'd tasted in 3 years. That propaganda promised glory, but delivered sawdust. That kindness was the cruelest weapon of all. He hired me. Germany needs teachers who won't lie anymore. You should consider teaching too. Love, Greta. July 28th, 1946. 1 year since the first strawberry ice cream. Liesel sat at the kitchen table with a piece of paper and a pencil. Outside Hamburg, summer was hot, like Louisiana had been hot, but different. Drier, less heavy. No ice cream carts rolling through the rubble. She wrote, Dear Greta, it's July 28th again, 1 year since the strawberry. I walked past a cafe today they're rebuilding slowly. Saw a child eating flavoured ice. Not real ice cream, just frozen sugar water. But the child smiled. First time I've seen a German child smile over food since... I can't remember. I wanted to tell that child about real ice cream. Pink and cold and perfect and given by the enemy. But how do you explain abundance to someone who's only known hunger? She stopped writing. Picked up the pencil again, started drawing. A crude sketch. She'd never been good at art of an ice cream cone. She coloured it pink with the pencil pressing hard to make the colour show. Underneath she wrote, I want to remember it perfectly. Because this was the day I learned what defeat really means. It means the enemy gives you something beautiful, and you can't hate them for it. You can only hate yourself for enjoying it. She sent the letter with the drawing enclosed. September 15th, 1947. Liesel wrote what would be her last letter. Dear Greta, I'm tired all the time. Doctor says my body never recovered from 68 pounds. Organ damage, heart, kidneys, liver. I'm 21 years old and my body is 60. He says I have maybe a year, maybe less. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of dying without making sense of what I learned. Does it mean anything? That we learned the truth? That we ate ice cream and understood we'd been lied to? Does it matter if we die with that knowledge? Please write back. I need to know this meant something. Love, Liesel. October 18th, 1947. Greta took the train from Stuttgart to Hamburg. 8 hours through occupied Germany, through zones divided by nations that had defeated them through checkpoints and paperwork and the bureaucracy of being a defeated people in a defeated country. She arrived at Erikastrasse after dark. Knocked on door 2B. Matilda answered, recognized her from a photograph Liesel had shown her. You're Greta. I'm Greta. I came to see Liesel. Matilda's face was complicated. She's dying. Doctor says weeks, maybe. I know. That's why I came. Liesel was in bed, weight down to 71 pounds. The gains from Camp Rustin all lost plus more. Her body was consuming itself, organs damaged by prolonged starvation, shutting down one by one, systems failing that would never recover, because you can't undo what years of hunger do to a 16-year-old body still growing. But her eyes were clear when Greta entered. You came. Of course I came. Greta sat on the edge of the bed, took Liesel's hand. It was cold and thin and felt like bird bones. You asked if it meant anything, what we learned. Does it? Yes. I'm teaching 200 students a year. Every July 28th I tell them about the ice cream, about you crying over strawberries, about propaganda breaking when we tasted real sugar, about how the enemy's greatest weapon was showing us the truth about our own lies. Do they understand? Not yet. They're 15, 16 years old. They think ice cream is just dessert, But in 10 years, 20 years, when they're adults, they'll remember. They'll remember that their teacher told them the truth about losing, about believing lies, about how kindness can destroy as surely as any bullet. Liesel's eyes filled with tears. I survived the war. I survived the camp. But I can't survive the peace. Because peace means living with what I know. That I ate ice cream while children starved. That the enemy fed me better than my own country. That kindness killed me more surely than any bomb. Then die knowing you told the truth, Greta said fiercely. Die knowing I'll carry it forward. Your nieces will grow up. Otto will be a man. Frida will have children. And I'll make sure they know there was a girl named Liesel who learned the truth and it tasted like strawberries. And she died because she couldn't unknow it. And that matters. That teaching matters. November 12th, 1947. 3:17 p.m. Liesel Hoffmann died at home in Hamburg. Organ failure. Malnutrition complications. Medical report said cardiac arrest, secondary to prolonged starvation. Death certificate said the war killed her, just took longer than bombs would have. Her last words whispered to Greta, who had stayed in Hamburg for 3 weeks. Do you remember the strawberry? The first one. I remember. It was pink like violence, cold like winter, sweet like a lie. Liesel smiled, small and sad and somehow peaceful. Good. Someone should remember. Someone should remember we learned the truth, and it tasted sweet. She died 27 minutes later. Age 21, weight 71 pounds. 3 pounds heavier than when she'd arrived at Camp Rustin, but those 3 pounds meant nothing against organs that had been damaged beyond repair. Matilda found a box of letters in Liesel's things. Letters to and from Greta. She read them all in one sitting, crying through most of them. Found the July 28, 1946 letter with the pink crayon drawing of an ice cream cone. Found one more letter dated November 10, 1947. Unsent. Addressed to Greta in Liesel's increasingly shaky handwriting. Dear Greta, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Thank you for remembering with me. Thank you for understanding that ice cream wasn't just dessert. It was the moment we stopped being able to lie to ourselves. Tell Otto and Frida when they're old enough their Tante Liesel died because she learned the truth too late. But you'll teach them early, so they never have to eat enemy ice cream to understand that propaganda kills. The truth costs everything, but lies cost more. Love always, Liesel. Matilda sent all the letters to Greta. December 1947, Fort Hood, Texas. Corporal Wyatt Caldwell, now 24, discharged from service, received a letter from Germany, from someone named Greta Eisenberg. The envelope was thin, the paper cheap, the handwriting careful. He opened it standing at his parents' mailbox outside Abilene, December wind cutting through his coat. Dear Corporal Caldwell, you don't know me, but you knew Liesel Hoffmann, the girl who cried over strawberry ice cream on July 28, 1945. I'm writing to tell you she died last month. She was 21 years old. Her body never recovered from the starvation you saw when she arrived at Camp Rustin. But before she died, she wanted me to tell you something. You didn't do anything wrong. You did something kind. And kindness, even when it hurts, is still better than cruelty. She wanted you to know that the ice cream mattered. It taught her the truth. And truth, even when it kills you, is still truth. Thank you for pushing that cart. It changed her. It changed all of us. We learned what we'd lost too. Not your bombs, your abundance, not your cruelty, your casual kindness on a Tuesday afternoon. That's what defeated us. And Liesel died knowing it. With gratitude, Greta Eisenberg, Stuttgart, Germany. Wyatt read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in his footlocker next to his discharge papers and a photograph someone had taken of him with the white cart bell's visible ice cream nowhere to be seen. He never served ice cream again. Never could. The smell of strawberries made him think of a 19-year-old girl crying in Louisiana heat, and he'd have to leave the room. His children asked him once years later why he never ate ice cream. why he'd turned down dessert at birthday parties, why the freezer never had it. He couldn't explain. How do you tell your children that you killed someone with kindness, that you pushed a cart and broke a girl so thoroughly she died from it 2 years later? So he just said, "Don't like it much," and left it at that. For 34 years, Greta taught at Gymnasium Stuttgart. Every July 28th, same lesson. She'd show Liesel's drawing the pink cone carefully preserved under glass. She'd read excerpts from the letters. She'd explain what ice cream meant in ways that had nothing to do with frozen dessert and everything to do with truth and lies and the weight of believing propaganda until the enemy's kindness proved it false. In 1978, a documentary filmmaker interviewed her. "What moment from your captivity stuck with you most?" "The ice cream, specifically watching Liesel's face when she tasted strawberry. She made a sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a sob. Something broke inside her. The lie broke. And once a lie that big breaks, you can't put it back together. She died at 21 because her body couldn't recover from starvation. But really she died because she learned the truth, and the truth was too heavy to carry in a body that broken." 1988. Hamburg. Greta, now 67, tracked down Otto Hoffmann through Red Cross records. He was 50 now, an engineer, married, 2 children. They met at a cafe that hadn't existed when Liesel died, in a Hamburg that was rebuilt, but not the same. Greta pulled out the pink crayon drawing. "Your Tante Liesel drew this for you, 1 year after the ice cream that changed her." Otto stared at the drawing. His hands, working man's hands, strong and calloused, trembled slightly as he took it. His eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. "I was 7 when she came home. I asked her what ice cream was. She tried to explain. I said it sounded like a dream." He touched the pink crayon carefully as if it might smudge after 42 years. "I didn't understand then. I thought she was talking about food." "She was talking about proof," Greta said. "Proof that everything we'd believed was backwards." "I understand now." Otto's voice was thick. "I have children, grandchildren. They eat ice cream whenever they want. They don't know what it cost for them to have that. Don't know their Tante Liesel died so they could live in a country where ice cream is normal, not proof." "Should I tell them?" he asked. "My grandchildren." "Yes," Greta said. "When they're old enough, tell them their Tante Liesel learned the truth the hard way, so they wouldn't have to." Otto kept the drawing, framed it. It hung in his home until he died in 2004, age 65, of natural causes, in a Germany that had ice cream shops on every corner. His children inherited it. They still have it. They tell the story to their children. July 28th, 1988. 43 years after the first strawberry ice cream. Greta Eisenberg, age 67, bought strawberry ice cream from a shop in Stuttgart. First time in 43 years she'd sought it out deliberately. Cost 2 Deutschmarks. She sat on a bench in Schlossgarten and ate it slowly. It tasted different. Not as sweet, not as cold, not as perfect. That night she wrote in her diary, "The ice cream today tasted wrong because I was free when I ate it." Liesel never got to taste ice cream as a free woman. She only knew it as a prisoner. Maybe that's why it broke her, because the sweetest thing she'd ever tasted came from captivity, and freedom only brought hunger. I miss her. I miss the 19-year-old girl who cried over strawberries and couldn't understand why kindness felt like cruelty. And I hate that I understand now. The enemy's kindness killed her more surely than any bullet, because it was proof. And you can't unknow proof. I'm 67 years old. Liesel died at 21. I've lived 46 years she never got. And every July 28th I taste strawberries and think this is what truth costs. This is the price of learning too late that you were lied to. The Berlin Wall is still standing, but I think it's coming down soon. I won't live to see it. But Otto will. His children will. Liesel's blood will see a Germany where ice cream doesn't mean defeat, where sweetness is just sweetness, not proof. That has to be enough. It has to mean something. Liesel, wherever you are, we mattered. You and I, we learned and we taught. And that has to be enough. March 15th, 1989. Greta Eisenberg died in her sleep in Stuttgart. Natural causes. Age 68. 6 months before the Berlin Wall fell. In her will, all of Liesel's letters and her own diaries donated to Stuttgart City Archives. The archive accepted them, catalogued them, preserved them in climate-controlled storage in acid-free boxes. Box 1947L contains Liesel's letters, including the July 28, 1946 letter with the pink drawing. Box 1945G contains Greta's diary, including the July 28, 1945 entry written in cramped handwriting. Today, Liesel learned what losing means. It tastes like strawberries. They sit there now. 2 women's truth preserved in ink and paper, waiting for whoever comes next to learn what they learned, that the enemy's greatest weapon wasn't the atomic bomb that ended the war. It was the ice cream given to prisoners on a Tuesday afternoon. Because bombs you can rebuild from. Kindness that proves you were lied to, that stays with you forever. 2 women, 1 ice cream cart. 1 survived to teach. 1 died at 21. Both learned the same truth, that kindness given to the right person at the right time can destroy as surely as any war. Liesel Hoffmann, 1926 to 1947. She tasted defeat.
And it was strawberry.